Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Joffy Noodle Legs here today with the second in our Arrow Video Week 2 movie. Bit of a treat today, well a treat for me anyway, because Arrow Video released one of my favourite movies of all time. And I picked it up on Arrow last week as I showed you in my pickups. And I'm just so chuffed to get. I've already got it, but I wanted the Arrow one because it's a more up-to-date print of the film. And we're looking at Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, starring Tom Conti, Rishi Sakamoto, and David Bowie. Or Bowie. So this is a really, really great film. It came out in the 80s that I was absolutely, I was addicted to it when it came out. Could not get enough of it. I went to the cinema to see it 6 times. I was young, and I was a massive Rishi Sakamoto fan. Hello, Sullivan. So I was a big fan of his. I loved his music that he did with his band and stuff like that. And he done. Oh, here he is. Hello, everybody. Here he is. And Rishi Sakamoto did the soundtrack to the film Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. And he sang a song. Well, he didn't sing a song from it, but he did a song collaboration from it with David Sylvian, one of my favourite singers, as you know. So there's a lot of connections, and I'm a big David Bowie fan. So there was a lot of connections that really drew me to this film. And that's, I think, made me love the film even more. So I'm really glad to be looking at it today. Yeah, this is set in Java in the Second World War, around sort of like a Japanese prisoner of war camp. The film kind of starts off with, we see an incident has taken place, and one of the Japanese guards has tried to assault one of the prisoners, and so they're all in this field. And the sergeant Hara, is trying to get this guy to admit to his crimes, to commit harikiri. And so you see Tom Conti there, who plays John Lawrence, and he's trying to sort of reason with Sergeant Hara, and it's not really going very well. And the Japanese guy says, I'll commit suicide, I'll commit harakiri, whatever it's called. And so he's just about to do that, and we hear a sort of shout coming, and it's from our Captain Hanoi, who's played by Rishi Sakamoto. So he approaches the incident, see what's going on, and Lawrence tries to tell him and convince him that this is what's happened, etc., etc. And Sergeant Hara is trying to get the guy to sort of commit the same assault against him in front of everyone. Anyway, so this sort of gets resolved, and we then sort of cut into the town, into the city, because Captain Ahoy has been called there to be on the bench of chairmen as a judge at a hearing of a British soldier, because there's a British soldier that's up for, they believe, that for spying, because he was there on his own, so they think he's a spy. Now this soldier is Jack Cilliers. It's played by David Bowie. So we join him in the court, and Jack Cilliers is sort of explaining himself, that he's not a spy, he's just a British soldier carrying out British duties in operation. He was there with like 4 other soldiers, but they got killed, in the midst. And then he sort of surrendered because he was on his own. So they all think he's lying, apart from Captain Hanoi, the Rishi Sakamoto, who seems to have some sort of attraction to him. Anyway, Captain Hanoi then sort of questions Jack Cellier himself, asking him, well, why has he done this? Why has he done that? And then he answers him, and he sort of believes him. And so he's Captain Hanoi is trying to persuade the judges that this isn't an act of spying; he's just being a soldier. So it's a prisoner of war offence. Because Captain Hanoi is like he's like the captain of this prison camp that John Lawrence and we saw at the beginning. That's the prison camp that he's with, that he runs. So I think he really wants to get Jack Celliers going to his prison camp. So he's trying to convince them that, you know, that he believes him. And then we sort of see afterwards that they're saying, oh, it's going to take a few days before they come to a sort of decision. And Jack Celliers is very, very sort of worn out. He's very worn out because he's been beaten by by the Japanese soldiers, and he did show them in court his wounds on his back, and that's sort of like I don't know if I don't know, but Captain Hanoi, but he seemed to quite like that quite a bit. But he told him to put his shirt back on and all this kind of thing. And we then cut to, like, I think the day after, and he's sort of like being found guilty of spying. So he's been now sentenced for execution as we see him approaching this sort of like hangar where they're going to carry out the shooting. So they take him there and they tell him that he's been found guilty of all charges and he's going to be executed. Anyway, they sort of tie him up to the pole, and they're about to put sort of like a you know, around his face, sort of like a so he can, excuse me, so he can't see. But Jack Cellier said, no, I don't want that on. And he said, no, it's not for you, it's for the soldiers, so they don't have to look into your eyes while you're dying, sort of thing. Anyway, they agree for him to let him not have the blindfold on. That's the word I'm looking for. So they tie him up, and then they sort of like prepared, ready to shoot him, and they shoot their guns, but they're blanks. And Jack Cellier says, that's a good one. And we see walking behind him, Captain Hanoi is walking behind him. So he's obviously got his way. We then jump back to the camp, the prisoner of war camp, and we see John Lawrence talking to Sergeant Hara about helping him to look after this Dutch soldier, the one that this supposedly was assaulted by that Japanese guard at the beginning. Because he seems quite a frail, weak man, this sort of Dutch soldier. And he's asking for him to help. And sort of Sergeant Hara's making fun of him, really, calling them they're all puffs, sort of thing, you know. And then it's quite funny, and they go, and then a soldier comes up to Sergeant Hara and says, there's a new prisoner arrived. And Sergeant Hara says to Jack Lawrence, oh, another puff's arrived. And and then we cut to the entrance of the camp, where they're sort of like bringing in the new prisoner, which turns out to be Jack Cellier's David Bowie. And John Lawrence knows him. I think he's been through some sort of training with him, so they sort of know each other. Anyway, we see that Jack is really weak, and he sort of collapses to the ground. And he goes, and they take him to like the prisoner of war sort of hospital part. Then Captain Hanoi has a meeting with Jack Lawrence and says, well, look, I want you to look after him. I want you to bring him back to health. I want you to look after him. I'll send the Japanese doctor to see him and that. And John sort of, Lawrence is sort of questioning, why are you so interested in Jack Cellier's and that? It's quite unclear. So he doesn't know what he's trying to do. But what he's actually trying to do, there's another captain there that Captain Hanoi, the British captain, he doesn't like him, and he wants to replace him with Jack Cellier's to be like the captain of the British prisoners. Because obviously, because it's an army thing, they will still have a captain. Although prisoners, there will still be one of the prisoners as like a captain that leads them, you know, and they follow his instructions rather than the Japanese captain's instructions. So I think that's how it works there. I think the Japanese captain of the prisoner of war camp would have instructed the British captain, who would then instructed the other prisoners to do it. Anyway, he wants to replace him with Jack. And so Jack's sort of like laid up, and he's sort of like, and he's a prisoner there now at the camp. So what's going to happen? So now I'm not going to tell you anymore. So Jack Celliers has now arrived at this prisoner of war camp. The captain, Hanoi, the Japanese captain, seems to have this shine for him, and really sort of like wants him to get well and look after him and this sort of thing. And there's a lot of things going on with the other captain and the other prisoners, and sort of John Lawrence, played by Tom Conti, is sort of caught in the middle. And, you know, and it's sort of like, and it's a playoff on, relationships, this film, between the Japanese guards and captain, and with the captain and the prisoners of the British Army in that. So, and it sort of like builds on all kinds of different sort of like subjects, you know, homosexuality and all this sort of thing. It sort of talks about them all, and then we get lots of sort of cutbacks later in the film with Jack talking about him and his brother and things like this, and we get backstories on his characters, and we see the sort of rise of this relationship between Captain Hanoi and Jack Celliers, and in its sort of demise. It's kind of a really good story, and it's so well told and brilliantly played out. And the music is like a character of its own. It's fantastic. So, what do I think of Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence? Apart from being one of the greatest movies ever made, it's probably one of my greatest sort of war films that it's because there's no real war in it, really. It's because you don't see any like action, like fighting. You only see the sort of brutality within the prison, and it's quite mild as well. It's not nothing really harsh in there to see. It's just a fantastic movie. The pluses of this edition, it looks stunning. They've done a really good job in remastering this film. The cast is phenomenal. Tom Conti is a great actor. Rishi Sakamoto, who sadly we lost earlier this year, passed away, is amazing as an actor. Although he's a composer and musician, you know, foremost, but then he's acted in a few films as well, and he's done a few more soundtracks. He did The Last Emperor and things like this, Empire of the Sun. He's done quite a few soundtracks as Rishi Sakamoto, and he's done the soundtrack to this film. And the soundtrack to this film is incredible. It's amazing. I love it. It's brilliant. There was a single like that came out from the soundtrack called Forbidden Colours with Rishi Sakamoto and David Sylvian. It's not in the film. It didn't use it in the film, but the actual main film soundtrack song was used as that song, and David obviously added vocals to it, and it was quite a big hit in the 80s. Unfortunately, that's one of the negatives of this edition. It does not contain the music video of David Sylvian and Sakamoto song Forbidden Colours, which I think would have just been fantastic, but it doesn't. I'm going to score the film an essential watch and give it a 10 out of 10. To me, it's just one of the greatest films ever made. It's a big part of my sort of love for film history, because it's one of the films that I was absolutely addicted to. In the 80s, I went to see this, like I said, nearly every week that it was on, I went to see it, sort of about 6 times in the cinema. I did the same with that Ben Kingsley film came out, Gandhi. I went to see that 3 or 4 times. I just find these sort of films so interesting and intriguing. And we had a spate of them in the 80s. You know, although I love my horror films, I also love other movies. and this was, you know, right up there for me. An amazing film, really, really cool. Any of you guys seen it? Let me know down below what you thought of Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, if you've seen it. It's an incredible film. And David Bowie acts really well in it. I mean, I've seen some of his films and I'm just thinking, ooh, you know, I'm not mentioning any Labyrinth, but I'm not mentioning any bad films. But yeah, but this film is fantastic. Really, really cool. 10 out of 10. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. Thanks for watching this video, guys. I won't be recommending to watch horror channels on this video because this isn't a horror film. I tend to only do that in the horror films. But that is the second film in my Arrow Horror Week. So we've got one more to go on Friday, which will be returning back to the sort of horror genre. So until then, look after yourselves, look after one another, and I really hope I'll see you all soon.